So, hello everybody. So, thank you for being with us. My name is Kamel Lajili. I'm an application development consultant and platform evangelist. I'm based in Germany. I belong to the developer relations team, taking care for developers in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And I'm accompanied with Eka, and very happy to have him here on stage, one of our elites. So, probably you introduce yourself. Eka.
Yes, I'm Eke. I'm also from Germany, living in the south of Germany between Munich and Salzburg and Rosenheim. I'm an independent software architect and developer, and I'm working on business applications, especially with mobile integration. And since some years, I like the BlackBerry platform, and now I'm focused on native development with Cascades. And yes, I'm very satisfied with this. And so today I want to tell you some experiences, what to watch if you have to localize your application from Cascades.
All right, thank you, Eka. So actually I was planning to have the session with another developer, another passionate BlackBerry developer to cover the WebWorks part, but unfortunately he didn't get a visa. So there are some things happen which we don't control, unfortunately. I will cover that part. Anyway, so why is it so small? I think we have to do something. So this conference is actually different than the other conferences, because, of course, we would like to share with you the latest and hottest and greatest in our SDKs and how you develop. But I think we would like to celebrate with you the launch of BlackBerry 10. And that's actually the idea behind that Eke is presenting, and someone else. I was planning to have him on stage. I think feel free as well to share with us your experience in terms of localization, in terms of internationalization. I assume some of you already have written applications on our platform and probably have some funny stories to share with us, so you feel free to interrupt any time and add comments or, yeah.
Excuse me, we're at the wrong session.
You are in the wrong session. No, you can't go out now anymore. The door is locked. Should we get them out? Let them go out?
No.
Okay, no problem. Yeah.
I thought you were kidding.
They take it serious then. Probably we shouldn't let them go then. I lose credibility. Okay. So very quick. So this is today's agenda. So I will be talking about how you should care, why you should care doing localization for your application. Then Eke will present to you how you would be doing that using the native and Cascades platform. I will be talking about the WebWorks side and how localization is supported by Upward, or okay, we don't call it Upward anymore, it's BlackBerry Word. And at the end, some tips and tricks and question and answer. We don't need to keep question and answer at the end. So as I said, so feel free to add comments or ask questions anytime. Okay, why should you care about localization? So BlackBerry is a global market. So although that's with the figures are with the old platform, but I think they are still valid. We have contracts, or we have a partnership with 565 carriers and distribution partners all over the world in 175 countries. So there are currently around 80 million users daily in our infrastructure logged in and using their BlackBerries. And we have BlackBerry Word support in 170 countries. This is really huge if you compare it with the other big platforms as well. So the market is available in 170 countries, and we support 33 languages on BlackBerry 10. On the playbook, a little bit less, but we will have parity then with a little bit of time. Then. So that means the BlackBerry playbook will get the other languages with the time as well. So the picture shows, talk probably shows it more. So in the green areas, there are where BlackBerry don't have coverage yet, and you can be sure we are working on changing that as well, because there are as well some political changes in some regions where BlackBerry then will be or is getting more welcome than it was in the fast. These are the languages supported on BlackBerry 10, 33 as I said, so most of, or the main languages spoken on Earth. And for the playbook, as I said, 6, a little bit less, but we will change it. So that figure here shows the revenues and the downloads split on in the global market. So if you have a look to the gray things here, you will see most of the downloads are done in the APAC region, then in Latin America, then in the Middle East. All three regions, they don't have English as a native language. So that's one of the aspects where I say localization and internationalization is worth to do. So most of the downloads are not done in North America or, let's say, in general, in English-spoken languages then. This is a zoom in and showing the revenues then. So the picture is from Latin America. You see Mexico. The most revenues in BlackBerry World are done in Mexico, where Spanish is obviously the language and not English then. In Europe, we have the UK. We have the most of the revenues, but we have France at the second position. These are coming from end of last year, so the statistics. So it's as well worth it for you to go and think about localizing in French or providing a French version of your application. Version is wrong, but French localization of your application. Yeah, and this is for the APAC. Indonesia, obviously not an English-speaking or native English-speaking country. And Australia, if you compare it with Australia, there are a huge difference then. Okay, so probably a definition. So what is internationalization? Internationalization, let's say, is the process of designing your application so that it adapts to various languages and countries. And the support is coming from our SDKs. So we provide you the tool so that the internationalization of your application is possible. Localization is the work you will be doing to get your application adapted to different cultures, to different languages. So this is the work when you go and translate the text or create new graphics for other regions and consider cultural aspects, etc. So, and probably to finish that small part, I'd like to show you an application which shows the definition quite well. That was number 7. So this is the settings screen. So I have at the moment the display language, the rendering language is set to English. The region is Germany. So I live in Germany, probably that's why. So if I open the calendar now, you see the calendar application is rendered in English. That's the display language which I selected. That means here you see in the button, day, week, month, search. If I open the menu, some menu items, agenda, people, schedule. So everything is actually displayed in English except some, we call them locale. And that's the date. You see in the top, Dienstag, 5th February. That's I selected Germany to be my location. That's why the numbers and the currency and the dates presentation adapts that region. And in that region, this is how you would do it. The same with the time. You see that we have the 24 hours presentation of the time. So if I go now to my settings and I change the region, let's say to something else. Let's say, where is it? Let's say American Suomi or whatever it is. So you see here, the date presentation has been changed. Now it's Tuesday, comma, and not the period as it was before then. And you have the time presentation. Now it's changed from 24 hours clock to the AM and PM. So if I now go again and change the language, let's say, not the location, but the language, let's say something crazy here, Arabic. So you will see again the application. So the menus and the rendering of the application change according to my display language. If I, let's say, press add, everything is displayed in Arabic, which should be the case because the display language is Arabic. But the localization, the locale, the time, and the date is still in the region which I selected before. And with that, I would like to hand over to Eka, who will be talking about the cascades and the support for localization. Yes, there is a question?
In the date time, the setting for the 24-hour clock, set it 24-hour clock or 12-hour clock?
The question is, can the user select if it should be 24 or 12-hour clock?
No, there is a setting there. I was wondering how that relates to
Yeah, okay, of course, you have the freedom to do that as a user, but if you don't do it, the default will change with the region you select. Okay? Yeah. All right, Eka, so, yeah.
Welcher Knopf?
Ach so,
See?
Demo.
Demo.
Yeah.
Okay, now we want to talk about localization in Cascades. At first, you have, if you start development of an application, it's important to think about these things. If you have a business application, for example, it is really important you can perhaps sell into different countries. Schon wieder verstellt hier.
I think we have again some trouble.
You can sell applications into different countries, so you need different languages, or you are only working in one country, but you have employees speaking different languages. It's the same thing. You need more than one language in your application, and you have to think about this at best if you start development. If you do it later, it could be really much work to add it to your application if you don't think about this from the first time on. And I'm doing business applications, and I learned from the past that it's really important to start with localization from the beginning, and you have to think about all parts of your application. Kamel just showed you that you can change the language from the device, and in Cascades you can react to this. You can get a notification. The user changed the language or the locale from the device, and you want to do something. Or you can have a special menu in your application and change the language there. Okay, we can have also context in different languages. This is not part of this session, but you have to think about this. Perhaps you need the descriptions of parts also in different languages. Then this could have an impact on your data structure. Then we have to think about dates and timestamps, because they are different all over the world. And you have to think, how would I store these dates and timestamps? Perhaps only as a numeric value. It's important never to store such values as a string value. Always store numbers, decimals, and dates and times unformatted, and think early about time zones. I know many applications, they have all included, but they never thought about time zones. And then you get perhaps later problems if you want to run a statistic. And think about currency. You have to store the currency together with your values in your data structures. It's all important. If you think early, then you have certified customers later. So how can I do this with Cascades, which means we have QML and we have C++. So we are getting some things out of the box. Inside the bar descriptor, you can localize your application icons, and you can localize your application name and the short description of the application. And there's also the place where you can add all the languages you want to support. Here's one screenshot from the bar descriptor. You add a language, select all the languages you need, and then your application knows that these languages should be supported. Also here you see how you can change the name and the description and the icon or the splash screen. So you can have icons different for each country. Sometimes you have icons where text is included or so from your application, or you have a different name in different languages. So all this can be defined in the bar descriptor. If you add languages in the bar descriptor, then in the folder translations, you will find subfolders with all your languages. So we have here the translations folder, the bar descriptor, XML, and we have to watch the .pro file, because inside this .pro file, all the files are listed from all your languages. I will show this later. So, going into your applications, if you follow the Cascades templates, the widgets to create a new application, then all this stuff will already be done for you. In your main, you will find an include of a QLocale and the QTranslator. And there is some code generated for you. And the important thing is here's a string. This is normally your application name. And this %1 means this will be replaced by the locale, DE or EN or so. And this name must really match the files inside your folders. If they don't match, perhaps you copied something from one project to the other and forget to change this. And you are wondering why translation doesn't work. Perhaps there was a typo. So in my all the examples I'm demonstrating here, you will find at BlackBerry, GitHub, Open Data Space projects. This application is Apache license. It's open source. It's free. You can take a look at it and see how I have done it there, and can copy and paste code from there. Or if you have questions, send me an email or ask on Twitter or in the forums. So at startup, when the application was set, there also the translator and the current locale was set. And now the question, how can you translate text? If you are working in C++, instead of normally using only the characters like settings, you only have to say TR for translate. Translate, and then the Cascades application knows this string should be translated and puts this string to you to the translation files and manages all this later. If you move this around or add files, add lines, and so on, or you are using the same word on different places in your application, the translation framework from Qt tries to find similar and to use the same translation you used before. In QML, it looks similar. You have QSTR. So this is the first thing. Never use any strings without translation. And if you do this from the beginning, it's not much work more. So next, there must be someone who translates your strings. And sometimes you will translate the strings. Okay, then you know where the strings are located in the screens and what this means. But perhaps you give it out to a service, and then you want to describe something for the translator, then you can add a command. You can here write something. This is a special address for locations where the driver goes to, and then the translator knows, this is a different word in English or in French, and because if you only write something like settings or address or name, could be really different. So use the commands. All these commands go into the translation files. Next is you have sentences with value arguments. And you say, dear customer, attached are 3 files. So you have a long sentence, but this 3 is inside. And of course, in different languages, it will be at another position. So you cannot split the text. you have to include it here. So here, this means meet, first argument, now. The first argument is Bruce Willis. This will translate meet Bruce Willis now. Looks the same in C++ or in QML. Really easy done. Yes?
So it doesn't start with 0, it starts with 1. The first argument is number 1, not number 0 here.
Yes, here's number 1. In many cases, of course, in development you have 0 at first. Yes?
This doesn't work for Slavic languages because they use the accusative form for the name in this sentence. So you cannot use the name just as is written in English.
Yes.
So, okay, so writing this sentence in another language is not simply plugging in this name within a sentence.
Okay, this means then your content is different for different languages. Then you must find a way to extract this value from your database for different languages.
No,
Not?
that's not what I mean. No. In English, in Dutch, and in French,
Yes.
you just plug in the name within a sentence.
Yes.
But in Slavic languages, the name gets altered. The ending is
The name gets altered. Yes.
Probably the example is a little bit confusing. Just imagine that instead of Bruce Willis, a file or picture or whatever. Probably if you if you think of a person or a name, then you have that language aspect or that cultural aspect. But I have a little bit of tips and tricks at the end of the session where actually these things shouldn't be done. You should really translate a whole sentence and not fragmentation of sentence and put them together. Normally it doesn't work like this. But the example is just to show you that's possible, and it probably more reflects on files, pictures, something, objects, and probably more than names.
And there will always be some things you cannot translate automatically, where you have to find your own way. And normally you don't have a string value here. Normally you have a value from your database. And if in this case you know there are different things to do, then you have to call a function and to get the correct value to put it here in. The only thing you had to learn from here is if you want to include an argument, use this %1, 2, 3, and so on, and do the translation. Yes?
If you use a %1, it gets into the translator as a %1.
Yeah, yes, we see that later. I have a.
Only that whoever does a translation, he's not allowed to change the %1.
Yes, yes, you have.
Our translators always translate it with it, and then it's not working.
Yes, yes, you have perhaps write something in the command. Don't change it, or you have to have rules for your translators and say never change these values here.
In the translation industry, there's lots of tools that will protect the variables so that it can't be translated as well.
There's also a tool for Qt, which helps you to translate these things and to avoid errors.
I think we need to speed up.
Yes, okay, speed up. Next one is with singular and plural. You have different things. You say, I have one file attached or I have two files attached. And it's the same. You have to, here's the argument. This is the one would be placed here into the string. And this one is the value, and this is important for the translation file. And then the translation file knows this is a value for a plural, and you will see an example later. So here's the translation file. It's an XML file structure, and it's not really easy to read. And at the last conferences, I had done all my translations manually in this file, and one typo and nothing runs. And in the meantime, I know there's a tool for Qt, the Qt linguist. And with this tool, you can do your translations really, really easy. So this .ts file is the root translation file. And in this translation file, you find the context. This is in a C++ file, and here's the file where it is located. There's a line. If you take a look at your source code, here's the source to translate. And this is, at first, you will find typed like unfinished. So now the system knows there's no translation done. Here's a DE translation file. And to translate, you have to remove this typed like unfinished and write your translation here. And of course, you can make one error and one delimiter to cut or so, and then the file isn't valid anymore. So it's better to use a tool for this. Here's the same for the plurals, and here's the source, and here is the translation, Datei oder Dateien, it's the same like file or files. And if there's no translation found, normally I have only placed this generic value here. Then it would work also for languages you didn't do any translation. And this is how it looks like. Here you have 3 files, 3 Dateien, 1 file, eine Datei. So I have to speed up. Good. Here's something in QML. Here's a label with a text, and you find here this text for the translation of the files. And here you see the real data is coming from the list data. It is not a string as shown in the examples before. You use your list data, and this will be put in here, and the translation gets out the right value for you. As Kamel showed before, there are so many different ways to format data and timestamps in different languages. And there you get some help in C++, and you get the help from the QLocale, because you can say here in this case I have a file info and I have a creation timestamp of this file, and I say QLocale, and the QLocale knows the current locale. Please give me the short format, or you can have a long format or do your own formatting on this. And then you get this value back and can display this in your UI. Same is with values from where the decimal point and the 1000 delimiters are different. You can also use a location file, say to string, give it this numeric value, and you get it back formatted with, it's really, really easy done. And here's an example from my application where you here see the size of a file different formatted for German and for English. As you learned, QLocale is your friend. Take a look at QLocale, at all the predefined things you will find there. Helps you to make your translations and to have a good looking UI in different languages. Next thing, be dynamic. This means if the user changes the locale from the device or inside your application, you should automatically retranslate your values. Here's an example. Switch the language and it immediately switches and shows the user the new values. And there's an addition you have to add in QML. If you add retranslate on language changed or on locale changed, then QML values will be automatically changed if the locale changed. If the locale changed, you get in C++, will be notified, you get a signal, the locale is changed, so you can do all your special stuff in C++, and this is done automatically from inside QML. Yes?
So the signal system settings, but I can also change from my code. It will also signal the same thing.
You can also change from your code and then call an send out a signal to QML that the local is changed. I have examples in my application. Is on GitHub. You can see it there. And here's what should be done. Per example, if the local updates, you get the signal, then you change the translator files. You get notified when if the user changes, and then the retranslate text would be done automatically. Here's a notifier. You get a signal, and you call your own slot. What should be done if the local changed? Perhaps you have to switch some code or change some images and so on. Yes?
Assuming that, for instance, I have an app I want to use it in Russian, but the rest of my phone I want to use it in English.
Yes.
So I change the language inside my app.
Yes.
Can I invoke the touch keyboard, for instance, in Russian in the app, but not on the scope of the device? And then when
I have not tried this. I know the user can easily switch the language on the keyboard.
We need to verify it, but I
Yes.
think that won't be possible because that's a system setting. You select the languages, the input languages you would like to support, 3 out of the 33, and that's it. You can change it, but you won't be able to select for a specific application, a set, and another application. Probably it would be. I probably say it can be done that you change the language, and then when the application exits, you change the language back.
Okay. Some last tips. You have to edit the .pro file to see if all your asset subfolders are included, because this is not done automatically. If your assets are placed in subfolders, then you have to add these subfolders here in the .pro file, and otherwise you are wondering why the translation isn't done. So it should look like that all your targets are there. And next one, at first I showed you the .ts file. This is a root file. Never change the root file. It's always generated. You have to create your own underline en or de and so on. Never change the root file. Will be overwritten next time. If you need images for different languages, then you can also translate your image source. So in QML, you have an image with an image source, and you can also say translate this, and then automatically you get another image. And if you are working with Git source repository and you are uploading to GitHub or to your own repo, there are in the translation folders QM files. You should put them to the git ignore because they are always recompiled, and otherwise you get merge conflicts. And this is a cute linguist. You can search for this. There's a download. It's a free tool, and this makes it easy to translate the translation files. So I'm running out of time. You can take a look at the application. It's here at GitHub, a BlackBerry open data space. You can download from there. You can also download this application from the BlackBerry world for free. Play around with this. You can also get the 2 GB free account for 5 users if you want to use this cloud service for your own applications. No, it's okay. Okay.
Okay.
So this was my part. Now I hand over to Kamel, and I'm here at the rest of the conference. You can ask me, because now I want to switch over to another session where I want to get some more information.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, we continue with WebWorks. I said it at the beginning. Unfortunately, The developer who planned to do the session couldn't come here due to stupid visas problems, but I'll try to cover that. And probably just a last comment. So if you base your Cascades application on one of the templates bundled in the SDK, you will find the primary setup for localization already done. So all those DS files and whatever. So I would recommend probably for those of you who are new or probably not didn't do big projects then, start it with a template. Even the Hello World template is, I think, is localized then, and then continue from there. Okay, now to WebWorks. So there are two extensions or system calls which you need when you write your web application, and it's awesome that we have them. The first one is system language, which will deliver to you the language set by the user, to the display language, the rendering language. And the other one is to deliver the region. So by the way, we will not finish the session by WebWorks. It's only 10 minutes, and then we will continue with some tips and tricks about localization in general. So just for those who left. Okay. So we have awesome features in the web platform as well. For example, you can get, for the same application, localized icons. So let's say you have an icon in English, and it should be different in German or in Arabic, then that's possible. It only needs, the icon needs to have the same name, and the graphics need to be set in the locale folders. So like you see here, these two icons here, one for the playbook and one for BlackBerry 10, they need to be created for German, for French, etc. And then you have the default icons, which will be displayed then for all the other languages. As well, the name and the description of the application that can be localized. The data needs to be put in the config.xml file. So for those of you who have written WebWorks applications, they know it. So you have to have that config.xml file. And then you have to place the several support locale then of the application name or of the application description there. So how do you localize strings in your application? It's done in JavaScript. So you would need a JavaScript file where you can have these key value pairs. So you have your matrix or list of the supported languages, and then you have the IDs of the strings, and then their values in the different languages. So you can define, let's say, a huge array then with all the supported languages and the language IDs, and then you can use them in the logic in JavaScript. Everything is stored locally here and is bundled with the application. But there is a need that you do the translation on the server. So that means your application is running, and then you, on the fly, you deliver the language set on the device to your server, and you pull then the corresponding strings then for that corresponding language. I wouldn't recommend that approach, let's say, for most of applications. Probably there is a need for complex applications, I don't know, some online translations or whatever. But normally, that's fine to go with the JavaScript approach and the local stuff. And I have a small application which you should find in the event archive or in the JAM on demand later on, along with the presentation. So don't worry if you can't take notes. We will deliver the presentation and that open source little application. And this is the address. You find it as well in GitHub. So if you browse there for localization, you should be able to find it. OK, so I'll show you that quickly, and then remove. First of all, the code of the application. So this is the config.xml, which I mentioned before. You see that's the application name, and it's localized in all those languages. And I have this very stupid description. And here, simple localization application, and localized in those languages. So application name and description. And then I have here a JavaScript file where I have my strings then defined for all the languages then. So for example, for English, so the alignment, the language support, and then the strings then. Okay. Then I will need to show you the structure. So the icons, as I said, need to be put in a subfolder. It's called here locales. And you see I have here an icon, the application icon, which is different in that language here than in German. It's just a very simple example then to show you that. So if you zip your web assets and then run them through, through our SDK, you should get a bar file which you can load into the simulator or on the hardware and try it out. Or if you use the Ripplean, you can create the package as well from within Ripple. Okay, so probably I switch to here. Okay, I have a simple password here, so don't bother. Okay, so it's still the language still set in Arabic. Let's change it so that you can read. Okay, that's the application. It doesn't actually do much. It just shows these strings which I defined in that JavaScript file. So if I go ahead and now change the language, the display language, let's say to French, and come back, open the application, it shows the text then in French. Not only that, so the icon of the application, it's now localized, as I said, in French. So it says example de localisation. Normally, you should be able to see the icon which I defined for the French language, which is another color than the bluish. But we have a bug in the SDK, which is known. I want to make you aware of that. We will fix it. So the icon doesn't change at the moment when you change the language. And it's a known bug. It's getting to be fixed and soon. Okay. As I said, feel free to use it. It's available on GitHub, and we will deliver it in the event archive. So. Okay. So now, what about BlackBerry Word? So when you would like to sell your application or put it, okay, need to switch. So when you are in the vendor portal and you would like to upload your application, you will be asked to enter an application name and an application description. And we request that the main or the default description should be done in English. Of course, unfortunately, there are developers, they fake a little bit. Although it's in the screen for English, they put the other language. It might slip the verification process, but we take care that actually those applications don't pass. You have to have a description in English, and then you should be doing the same description in the other languages. You can add as many languages as your application supports. Of course, maximum 33 for BlackBerry 10. Okay, so and screenshots, you can't link screenshots to specific languages. You can upload up to 50 screenshots for your application. But I recommend if you did the work and your application runs on several languages, then put as well screenshots to display that. So if you render your application or you are supporting, let's say, Chinese or Arabic, why not uploading a few screenshots to show the user that's possible as well? Okay. Language consistency. So in the main description, the English description, you probably put a lot of work to describe your application. Keep that consistent when you translate it to the other languages as well. And if you say, or your application says it supports more than language, expect that people probably will contact you with those languages asking for support. And you should be able to deliver that support as well. Yeah? You can, as I said, you can tell which languages are supported, and then you can say in which regions your application should be seen in the market. That's possible, but you can't do this 2 times customization. That's not possible. You can add the language as French, but then you can limit your application to Belgium, for example, or to France then. Okay. Okay, distribution restrictions. So probably if you think about it, if you provide your, if you support several languages or several locale, probably you should sell your application as well in those regions. It doesn't make probably sense to publish an application which is very regional focus in all over the world. Then, but it's up to you. It's your choice. Then, some tips and tricks to finish with. So. Think about localization testing. Do pseudo localization testing. So normally the localization is carried on by agencies. You have to pay money to get it professionally done, either the text or the graphics and everything. So, but before probably you go to that step, do localization testing. You can use dummy data, dummy graphics and whatever, just to make sure that your application and your application logic is prepared for this kind of stuff. That's very important. You have to check if your application supports double byte characters like in Chinese and Thailand and all the East Asian languages. The same if you support bi-directional languages like Arabic or Hebrew, then does it work? Normally you have a mixture of text in those languages. Is the application supporting the locale change? However, I have to say with our SDKs, this is supported and it takes a lot of work for you. So be aware that a lot of languages, they are different. So if you take the East Asian languages, they look beautiful, the script is beautiful. However, they are more complex. They need more space in the vertical, not in the horizontal, let's say. Be aware of that. As I said, with Arabic and Hebrew, you write from right to left, and usually you have a mixture of text because the Latin existence is all over, I would say. So make sure that your application cope with the language change then. The same with the date format. We have mentioned that before, date format, currency, and all of that. So if you compare, for example, the date in French, it doesn't have any capital letters or comma or periods. It's different than from the German or the US then. Make sure that you are aware at least of those differences then between the languages. We have a small screen, and there are size limitations. So there are estimations that, for example, if you translate your text from English to German, you will need up to 50% more space to place the correct German text in there. The same with Thai. So you need more vertical space, so you can't place the elements very close to each other. Otherwise, you will be cutting the characters then. The Chinese language, you have sometimes long sentences. If you translate them in Chinese, then there are only a few characters. Then you'll be having a lot of empty space. Probably then you should think about making the fonts bigger, or it doesn't probably look very nice if there is a lot of empty space then. Okay, and if you are supporting the right to left languages like Arabic and Hebrew, make sure that you mirror your complete UI, because the people read from right to left. So if you have, let's say, a list of radio buttons, then normally you have the radio buttons on the left and the titles on the right. If you change the language, you should really change as well your UI so that you have the radio buttons on the right and their descriptions on the left. The same in lists. Normally you have, when you open a list, you have the elements aligned to the left. You have a small arrow to the right. You click on the arrow to open the list. If you support Arabic or Hebrew, you have to mirror that. So you will be having the arrow on the left side then. Now that's to show you what I was talking about. So the one in the middle is German. You see the description in the middle is 3 lines. It gets really bigger then. And as well, the controls, the labels on the controls, they are much longer, I would say, than in the English. And with the Chinese, it's vice versa. So you see there is a lot of empty space. Probably you can go ahead and make the font and look bigger, and probably it's more readable in the Chinese. Okay, so leave room for extension would be the recommendation. So when you define your controls and you put them in English, then make them bigger so that when the user changes the language, there is enough space to place them. And there are some estimations, let's say for short text, it can be 200% longer the need. For bigger, longer text, let's say up to 70 characters, then at least 40% more empty space should be there for the case you switch the language. And where possible, place labels above associated controls or fields. So if you don't have if you have space in your main screen, then why the heck should you bother then putting them close to each other? You can put the label on top of the control, which is okay. Then there is plenty of space then when you change the language. Okay, so avoid displaying concatenated text. That's very important, because sometimes if you don't care about that, probably the most important word in the sentence will be cut, and then the user would not understand what's about that. So when you do your localization testing, then be sure that the new text in the other language have enough space. And if you are forced to make it shorter, then reduce the text rather than cut it. If that doesn't work, put it in 2 lines. If that doesn't work, you can still use some ellipsis then, but then please use a tooltip then when you hover with the control or whatever on that. So don't leave it to the user to guess what's behind it. The font considerations. So some fonts, then, if you use them in italic or in bold, they get bad readability. So that's probably applies especially for Asian languages. So go through that testing as well and have a look if that really makes sense then to display fonts then in bold or in italic. Some fonts don't include all the characters you need. So, for example, for Russian or Polish, okay, at the moment the user is not able to change the font of the display. You can change the size of the font, but you can't select the font. But in the old platform that was possible, and I assume that will come one day to BlackBerry 10 as well, so be prepared for that. Yeah, and there are a lot of languages which they have accents and dots and whatever they call them, diacritics. So like the Thai or the Arabic, which makes the characters then grow in the vertical, let's say. So you need to be aware of that. If you select a small font, then those dots and those symbols then they won't be readable very easy then. So that's a matter of testing and of tuning, I would say. Yeah, the importance of context. There is an example. H2 in North America refers to the home second phone number. So if you use that in your application, you give it to someone to translate it, they won't translate it the right way because H2, nobody would know what's exactly the meaning of that outside probably North America. So be aware you need to deliver sentences and phrases inside the context. And you have seen with Eka, so there is the possibility to deliver a comment to the translator in case you think he should know a little bit more about the context. Okay, and if your application shows the languages supported, like the one from Eka, the open data space, please display the languages then in their language then. So don't say Italian, but Italiano, and if you support Chinese, display the language then in Chinese. I think that's more user-friendly. Colors and graphics. Colors, graphics, and symbols, they have cultural meaning, and that can be different from one region to the other. Be aware of that. I don't have actually a good example for that. Yeah, don't display text and numbers on graphics. So let's say you have a question mark on a graphic. That fits very well if you are using your application, let's say, in Latin languages. But once you change the language to Arabic or Hebrew, then you will have the question mark in that graphic actually looking or placed in the wrong direction then. That's why we recommend not to put any text or symbols in the graphics. Keep them simple graphics then. Or you do a localization of the graphics then. That's possible as well. But you need to do that then. Once the language changes, you have to load the new graphics then, which is supported by our SDKs. Yeah, mentioned that. So now some hints for coding, for programming. Avoid concatenated partial strings. I think developers, they tend to do that. They think, okay, if I have a long sentence, why not making fragments of that, which I can reuse there and there. We don't recommend that at all, actually. So if you say, I don't know, so I like that's this session, great stuff. Okay, if you translate it, in English it sounds okay. If you translate it to another language, it might sound very horrible. So if you have both of them just collated to each other. So we recommend to take the whole thing and translate it. That gives more context and more readability then. Avoid using variables in place of nouns. That's the case, for example, when you say the X is locked, and then you can change the X with display or keyboard. In English sounds perfect. The display is locked, the keyboard is locked. But if you go to another language, the display might be feminine or masculine, and which has impact on the rest of the sentence. So locked in English, it doesn't change, but in French or in Arabic or whatever language, it might be it sounds stupid, and you are using a verb applied on a feminine, although it is a masculine or something like this then. So be aware of that. And avoid hard coding, spaces and punctuation, question marks or whatever. They should all be put together in the sentence which you give to the translator. So 5 minutes ago? Okay. So anyway, so take the whole thing and translate it. Don't do a lot of programming logic behind that. So that's counterproductive in this context. Yeah, that's what the last sentence says. Use the framework macros which we deliver in Cascades or in HTML5. Okay. Yeah, I think that has mentioned as well by Eka, and it's supported by the framework. So the first thing is about the first day of the week that changed with the region. You have to be aware of that, but that's supported with the QLocale or the locale, the framework we are having. The same applies for numbers or for currencies, etc. Luckily, then, if you go for our frameworks, then that's all covered. Of course, when you do the OpenGL rendering yourself and you link your fonts yourself, etc., then it's a different story. You have to take care yourself about everything. Okay. So yeah, here are some probably good practice. So use subjects, include subjects. So don't say the list that appears when you type. Don't say the list that appears when you type instead of the list that appears when typing. So you use subject, you type. Or include articles. So press the escape key, and don't say just press escape, which is probably in the developer language very common then. Use the article the. It gets translated in the correct language then. Use relative pronouns. So the email address that you use instead of email address you use, and stay consistent. So if you are using a term, let's say you are using smartphone in your application, use always smartphone. Don't change one time to intelligent phone or clever phone or whatever. Stick to that smartphone, because then the translator will, or it will give more accuracy for the translations, I would say. Okay, so don't use the slang, items, jargon, or whatever. I think a good example is that term, fire in the hole. A lot of games, they use that. Someone told me that example, so I'm repeating it here. So fire in the hole means something will explode in the next few seconds or whatever. Mined, it was used in the mining industry to warn the colleagues then working there. If you go and translate that in other languages, that would be probably catastrophic. If you do really a bad translation, then it needs the whole context then for the translation. Avoid references to ethnicity, religion, culture, and gender where possible, unless the application is exactly for that purpose done. And for countries, then use the political name. It's not mainland China, it's People's Republic of China then. So be a little bit strict in that. So the last slide. So your takeaways from the session. So localization makes your application available to our customer base. At the moment, we don't have BlackBerry, or we have probably a few BlackBerry 10 devices. Out there, we have 80 million users, BlackBerry users. Of course, we are hoping that all of them will switch from the old OS to the new OS. So we have a very good customer base, and your application can reach them. Yeah, so our SDKs, they support localization or internationalization, either in the native Cascades or WebWorks, and BlackBerry Word supports that effort as well. It makes it easy for you. And think about localization from the start. Eka mentioned that as well. So even if you tend to publish your application only in one region, it doesn't hurt to consider that from the beginning. The framework supports it. You don't need to do the translations. You don't need to pay the money for the agencies. But make it from the beginning possible, because you never know where will be your customer base. So you have your application in the store. Probably your biggest fans will be in Indonesia. Then it makes sense then to translate or to localize then the application for that region. Make it from the beginning available, and then you are fine. And as I said, if you use one of the templates in the SDK, you are already in with that. Okay, with that, so if there are any questions, happy to answer. Oh, I don't have any time, so no question, but I'm around. Thank you very much, and good luck. Okay.